I first want to praise the graduating class for making it this far, and the teachers, family, friends, and all others who helped them along the way. High school can be a very difficult time for young people, and all of the pop quizzes, boring lectures, and textbooks can never compare with the support of those you care about and the life lessons they have taught you. I also want to thank everyone for asking me to speak this year. I hope that everyone can take something away from my story, but especially those who are about to go out on their own for the first time. There were times that I wasn't sure I could go on in high school. Times that I thought about giving up, as I'm sure you all have. During a particularly rough time, I remember a journal entry assignment being handed back to me by my 10th grade English teacher, Mrs. Poland. Underneath my grade, she had written the words, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment," by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It was then that I realized that no matter who I was or how I thought, there would always be those who would try to change me. I am thankful that I had the foresight then to know that there was nothing wrong with the person I was or the person I am today. As I am sure most of you know, I recently opened my third nonprofit after-school program for teens. It was important for me to feel accepted when I was in high school, and at my centers, everyone is accepted no matter who they are, how they look, or what situations they've grown up in. We provide a clean, drug, and alcohol-free place for teens to go to keep them focused on school, family, community, and the next steps in their lives, whether it be college or the workplace. Not only is it a fun environment for teens, but we teach them to become productive citizens and responsible adults. Today I want to tell you a little bit about how growing up was for me, how I was confronted with the issues I had, again as an adult, and what I have done to make a difference, and what I've learned from each situation. I grew up feeling different from everyone else, and I didn't know why. It wasn't until about the time I was 15 when I started spending some time outside of this small community that I realized I wasn't different, but everyone I knew were all the same. I met a lot of different types of people, and I found a group that made me feel like I could really be myself. They, like myself, were outcasts. They were different, just like me. I was hooked immediately. Felt like a kid in a candy store. I took in all encounters as though it was a new flavor of food I had never had the pleasure of tasting. I met boys who dressed like girls, girls who dressed like characters out of Gothic novels. I met people with tattoos and piercings, people like me. I realized that most of them had either been kicked out of school for refusing to conform to strict dress code policies or had dropped out from sheer boredom. I also realized that these kids were smart, some of the brightest minds I had ever come across, being judged unfairly by the very society that was supposed to nurture them and help them grow because of how they looked. It was around that time that my teacher had given me the Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, "Something so small that would eventually change my life." From this, I learned that no matter the consequences, I had to be true to myself. While attending college, I was confronted with a unique situation where I was able to start mentoring teenagers who were considering dropping out of school. I was suddenly thrown back to my own high school times when I had found the person that I truly was. I approached the situation with these kids gingerly at first. I tried to figure out the reasons why they didn't want to be in school and help them change the things that hindered them. Just like them, I knew how hard it was to be different in a world where being different was bad. I took it upon myself to go to the schools that rejected these kids in order to speak on their behalf. What I ran into were administrators that upheld rules that they didn't believe in, teachers who didn't care as much about how these kids looked, but whether they were in class and learning. I knew I had to do something that would help schools change their policies and be more accepting of alternative cultures. From this, I learned that I had to speak for those whose voices were not strong enough to be heard. I started speaking at area high schools about 5 years ago. I met all sorts of kids from all different walks of life. I also met their parents. While some seemed hesitant, there were many who were supportive. I heard over and over that they wished their kids had something to do after school, whether it was to keep them out of trouble or to provide them with an opportunity to have relationships with their peers. I started out small, organizing monthly meetings in my home where kids could get impartial counseling, homework help, and companionship from people like them. The monthly meetings quickly became weekly. Eventually, kids were showing up every day, with the meetings spilling out into my yard and out onto the sidewalks. I knew that these meetings were too big, too important not to continue, that they had grown too large to go on at my house. I opened my first center in an old recreation building with the help of donations from parents. It wasn't spectacular. The walls and floors were stained with years of dirt, and the windows shook when the wind blew, but for these kids, it was where they belonged. They started bringing their own decorations from home, an old family couch that was long forgotten in the basement, chairs that hadn't been used in 30 years, tables that were found on the side of the road. A particularly inventive teen even brought a bathtub filled with pillows. Through their own doing, these kids completely furnished that old abandoned recreation center to make it something that was truly their own. This taught me humility, because there are greater things at work than what you can do on your own. My centers have come a long way since then, through partnerships with local businesses and grants from the state and government. The teens that frequent the centers have come a long way too. Most have found a way to compromise with authority figures in their lives and stay in school, many even moving on to college. But more than that, I like to think that they contributed to my successes. These kids taught me more than I could ever teach them. If you take nothing else away from this, I hope that you remember these 3 important life lessons that I have learned. I learned that it's okay to be who you truly are, because each of us is important in our own way. I learned to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, because some of the most important things that can be said come from those who feel silenced. And I learned to always be humble, because you never know when a bathtub full of pillows will become one of your most prized possessions. Henry David Thoreau once said, "Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you have imagined." It's exactly what I've done, and I hope that each of you can too.